The West Virginia Mountaineers are forgotten, and most of the East Coast of the Big 12 is in conversations about expansion. Why are we doing that? This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to Locked On Big 12. I am Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. Today, we're joined by Mountaineer Paul, the brand new host of Locked On West Virginia that is dropping soon, where you will get daily content on the Mountaineers. We're not just talking Mountaineers, though. We're talking about Big 12 expansion, both eastward and westward, as well as West Virginia not getting a lot of love in the Big 12 preseason poll that we'll go through. And we'll also break down that Week 1 matchup with West Virginia and Penn State. You hit subscribe, I keep my job. Mountaineer Paul off the riff right here, as you are welcome to the Locked On Big 12 for the first time. West Virginia has seen westward expansion for the Big 12 Conference in Utah and Arizona State, and now the new talks of Washington State and Oregon State that certain sources have put out there. Does it feel like this school, since it joined the conference, has been neglected in giving them anybody regionally to play?
I think so. I mean, obviously, Cincinnati is a decent caveat. We're happy with that.
You could drive there if you wanted to, right?
If I wanted to, yeah. UCF is in the same time zone, and a lot of our fans mentioned that when we traveled down there. It was at least nice to be in the same time zone because we have to switch time zones. Yeah. But outside of that, whenever they did the scheduling here the next few years, they did not. I thought both games should be protected, because they're in the same time zone. They are not. Right. We either get one or the other, unfortunately. That's something that we kind of feel slighted on. And then you mentioned the westward looking expansion. That's tough too, and I think at the end of the day, we've been doing it longer than anybody else in the Big 12. I mean, we've been doing this for over 10 years now. And there's been a lot of studies done on win-loss record when you go west, when you go east, and it really makes an impact. So I think, they did a really good job this year for our schedule. They broke up our home aways, which was great because we only have one back-to-back road game this year. That's doable. But generally speaking, the expansion part of this is what you're talking about. And no, that's not good. Going further west, not good for us. We do not want to go to Oregon. I mean, goodness gracious, we already go to Ames, Iowa.
Yeah. The travel is one thing that doesn't make a lot of sense in my brain when you talk about USC and Rutgers or West Virginia and Arizona. When you got the news, and this is representing really all of West Virginia, when you got the news that the Big 12 is going to expand with those four corner schools from even BYU prior to Utah, Arizona, Colorado, was it elation, excitement, or, oh, great, here are 5-6 more schools that we have to get on a plane for?
I think a mixed bag there. You're glad the conference is strengthening and surviving. Yeah. At the same time, you're looking at this like, man, 4 more road games or however many there are in any given year. We were one of only 2 teams that played all 4 newcomers last year. In a sense, that actually helped us in some ways because there was an adjustment there. But, love seeing Colorado come back tradition-wise, Big 12-wise. Thought that was a good move. Was kind of iffy on the others. They turned out to be pretty good ads. But generally speaking, yeah, I mean, it's never been good for us as far as travel goes. And then you have to factor in the monetary piece of it, which is probably a bigger impact. When you hear our athletic director talk, probably 70% of our revenue athletically from football goes to the travel. It's a lot. And unfortunately, it's not going to be any better.
No, not based on where the Big 12 is looking, if the rumors about Washington State and Oregon State are true. However, there are also very prominent rumors about the ACC falling apart. If you have a wish list of those schools, say 4 to 6, that West Virginia could have added to the Big 12, who is up there for you?
Well, it depends on if I'm thinking for West Virginia or for the overall state of the conference. Obviously, everybody wants Clemson and Florida State. Right. But West Virginia has what I would consider an active rivalry with that's in the ACC in some form or fashion. We have a trophy with Syracuse. We have a trophy with Virginia Tech. Obviously, the backyard brawl started in the 1800s. It's one of the longest-running rivalries and hottest contested rivalries in college football. And Miami. West Virginia and Miami played a ton of games in the early 2000s that were really, really good. We beat some of their better teams that they've ever had. And West Virginia fans really, who doesn't really show up for a Miami game, though? I mean, they're still, even though their brand has fallen off, people still show up to watch them, because it's the U. But if I had to put a list out there, it would probably be, I would have to put outside of Clemson and Florida State, I would say probably Miami number 1, Virginia Tech number 2, Pitt number 3, just because of the rivalry for us. And I do think that rivalry means a lot to the conference.
Yeah.
And then number 4, probably NC State.
Good athletic department. No Louisville there is surprising. I would love a good West Virginia. Louisville's a good choice too. It feels right. If I would give you 5 or 6 or 7, Louisville certainly in there, I'm sure. Coming up, speaking of 5 or 6 or 7, or even lower than that, West Virginia's ranking, according to Pick 6 previews in the preseason, is not good. Why don't they get any respect? This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel.com is where I go when I need a little extra pocket change and have some fun with sport. Like, my thing is, I can go to the movies and I can spend $30 on a movie ticket and a popcorn and a drink. Or I can go to FanDuel, spend $30 on the Texas Rangers money line against whoever they're playing that night. And sometimes they win. And that $30 can turn into $60 or can turn into $75 or can turn into another $30. And that's great. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long at FanDuel. Head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Visit FanDuel.com and do it today. Mountaineer Paul joining Locked On Big 12 today to talk all things, not just Big 12, but specifically West Virginia and their standing within the conference. Look, I mean, last year I had West Virginia at 1-11. I had no faith in Neil Brown. It reminds me a lot of how I feel about Cincinnati this year. I just don't have faith in Scott Satterfield. Neil Brown proved last year that West Virginia can win, and not just that they can win, they can do it under his reign. This year, though, Pick 6 Previews, one of the more accurate magazines that comes out every year. Brett Ciencia is a Heisman voter, over 100,000 followers. Guy's got a pretty good following. He has West Virginia at 9th in the conference, just ahead of schools like Texas Tech, Colorado, behind the likes of TCU and UCF. It feels like, Paul, we go through this year in and year out where West Virginia does not get respect preseason. Before we even talk about specifically that ranking, let's talk about how the national media views West Virginia. Is it fair or is it unfair?
It's unfair. It really is. And a lot of people, there are people that disagree with this take. I actually had a little back and forth with John Kurtz about this. He thinks that we maybe embellish it a little bit, but to be honest, we are right in the middle of it. I can name so many things, like Kirk Herbstreit on record saying that we would get destroyed by Clemson in the Orange Bowl. Like, you never hear commentators say things like they're going to get destroyed today. Yep. Like, I can go on and on and on, as far as games in the past we've been paying.
Arizona State athletic director, I know it's not media, but him saying, I'm not going to Morgantown.
Yeah, or you want to go Pat Narduzzi in the Pitt Panthers wearing helmets and shoulder pads off the bus, calling West Virginia a zoo. Different things like that. We don't have the best reputation from the early, mid, and late 90s because we did have a rough crowd then. But West Virginians are much more educated than people give them credit to be. Unfortunately, there's a stigma here. I think it's really, when you get down to it's what we're dealing with. There's a bit of a stigma. People think that we're hillbillies, that we're not intelligent, and that we are more primitive than most other people because we act off emotions, that kind of thing. On the field, West Virginia, I mean, you really can't mince words with it. Top 15 all-time in wins, winningest team in history without a national championship, whether that's good or bad is neither here nor there. It's extreme success in football and basketball. It's been this 10 years in the Big 12 that's really hurt us, and I harken back to that. We just weren't ready for that move. I think the ACC or even the SEC, we probably could have figured out. But trying to recruit to a Big 12 in West Virginia is tough. And then you add in all the travel. It's been really rough on us, and it's hurt our image. The Flying WV is in my opinion, a really nice brand, a top 25 brand, I would say, in the country, top 30. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't see it that way, and I do believe it's a stigma. And once that snowball gets rolling in that direction, it's really hard to get it back, similar to what Deion's going through right now.
Yeah. And I do want to cover your tracks. Somebody threw a shoe or something out of their car window when they heard you say that West Virginia could have had more success in the SEC. I point to Missouri. Missouri moved there, and a whole lot of people thought, there's no way. I mean, there's not a lot of in-state talent. There's no way they compete. They go to consecutive SEC championships, and West Virginia was in a better spot than Missouri when that move was made. Now, looking at West Virginia this year, fast forwarding to 2024, Perciencia, he's got West Virginia at 9th. I mentioned that. He puts Garrett Green at 8 in the QB rankings, and it's a very good QB conference. I have him more in the 6 range, but at least that's ballpark, I guess. Running backs, he's got West Virginia at 2nd. However, an offensive line number 1 in the conference. So the offense is set. He is very low on the defensive line, the linebacking core, and the wide receiver group. How do you feel about that assessment?
He's not very educated, to be honest. I'm really shocked. I mean, it's wild because it almost goes against his prediction a little bit to have us number 1 running back room, number 1 offensive line. You win games on the line of scrimmage, and having the best offensive line in any conference is going to give you a chance to win games week in and week out. We returned everybody we had last year on the defensive line outside of one guy that matters. Our linebacking core is extremely talented. It's actually the deepest and most talented group on our defense as of right now. Josiah Trotter, everybody knows his dad was Jeremiah Trotter, the great Philadelphia Eagles player, would have started as a true freshman last year and unfortunately had a season-ending injury. He is going to be set to start at one of those linebacker spots. Trey Lathan was on a first-team All-Big 12 course until he got injured last year. Ben Cutter started as a freshman last year. All 3 of those guys are back. We've heard over and over and over again that those guys are by far the most talented linebacker room we've had in over a decade. Defensive line-wise, obviously Sean Martin has been here for 4 years. He's a mainstay and an extremely talented guy. They look for him to have a nice year. And then Fatima Mulba, the Penn State transfer, is going to be great in the middle for us. And a lot of people feel like he's a great run stopper. The defense has a lot to prove. Obviously, I'm surprised that the DBs isn't kind of where he pointed to because we had 6 transfers in that room. It screamed to me that you have a defensive back issue. You get 6 transfers, right? And we've already named 2 starters in that room. So, Garnes, Duquesne transfer, and then the Northwestern transfer, Hollis, is going to start on the other side. They really, really pulled themselves apart and set themselves apart. When West Virginia played Duquesne, he didn't even allow a catch. Garnes didn't. So they love him. He's really shown up. And then obviously Aubrey Burks, who was some people's number 1 safety in America last year. Coming into last year, he didn't play to that, but he's also back. And we feel good about it. We feel like the defense is going to be above average. Offensively, you mentioned wide receivers. I'll go there really quick. We were really young. We started 3 freshmen there last year. And so in week 1 against Penn State, that's not a good recipe. And Garrett Green really didn't have any proven playmakers. Cole Taylor, the tight end, ended up catching almost 50 balls and 4 touchdowns last year at 6'7". He's going to be great. And then you look at those receivers. They've all grown an extra year. You bring in 2 Power 5 transfers and Justin Robinson at 6'4" out of Mississippi State, and then Jaden Bray out of Oklahoma State, who was their second leading receiver, and he's over 6'2". Those guys have all separated themselves. Sutton Clement obviously had a lot of numbers last year, did really well. But in my opinion, look for Traylon Ray. He will separate himself as the number 1 receiver. And then really quick, a freshman to watch, Day Farmer. Watch out for the name Day Farmer this year.
Well, you've convinced me. Last thing quickly here, Paul, the schedule. Last season, you had those 4 newcomers and got to pick on them a little bit, the Houston game aside. Don't have to talk about that. I lost a lot of money on the Houston game. This year, you get 6 of the Big 12's top 7 teams, as well as only 1 of its bottom 4 squads. How do you balance that talent of a roster with a pretty tough schedule?
Well, I mentioned earlier we got lucky splitting a lot of the home aways. If you look at the schedule, we split a lot of home and away games. That helps. On the road at Arizona is a really scary game, I think, for anybody. But for us, it's going to be tough. Kansas State, Oklahoma State, all tough games, all coin flip games. I think at the end of the day, Penn State in week 1 is the barometer. And so that's the game you look to see really how good we're going to be, because we returned 93% of our offensive production from last year on a team that led the country in rushing. That's a great start. So I feel good with that in any game, road or home. So the schedule's tough. Pitt is not to be underrated. And Albany, they almost won the FCS National Championship last year. Nobody even talks about them in our schedule. So, the schedule's tough. 11 power conference games is never easy. It's not what you want to do. We're moving away from that, thankfully. But we can't get away from the brutal stretch that we have right after Kansas. From Kansas on, it's buckle your chin strap. And that's why a lot of people have us lower, in my opinion, than we should be, is because they look at that schedule and just use logic. It's going to be hard to get out of that unscathed, especially if you've already got a loss at Penn State or Pitt, which I doubt happens, but it could. It's a rivalry game. Yep. That's going to make it tough. I haven't done my preview on the team yet this year as far as the schedule goes and given a record, but it's going to be tough.
Yep. It's certainly daunting compared to what Utah was given in their brand new team. Coming up, maybe the toughest game on the schedule and the biggest game on the schedule nationally is that Penn State game. Let's talk about it on Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Sitting outside of my house, there is a white Nissan Maxima Arkansas plates 2016 model, and it is banged up. The reason it's banged up is I work for a baseball team. We work for a baseball team. Your car sits outside of the stadium, and it gets hit with foul balls. And then I say, Nissan Maxima, come on, man. Your bumper's all messed up. And it says, well, if you go to eBay Motors, then I can get a new bumper, superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, bumpers included. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. Over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need, the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Mountaineer Paul on the show today talking about the biggest game in the non-conference in the Big 12. Penn State will host, West Virginia will host Penn State in week 1 of the college football season, and West Virginia will win that game. Paul, why?
Simple to me. I'll go back to last year really quick. The score wasn't really indicative of the competitiveness of the game.
Tight game, unexpectedly tight game, 100%.
Yeah, they pulled away late, and James Franklin's really known to watch and see what the spreads are, and he loves to cover the spread. You hear the phrase "good teams cover the spread." He mentions that all the time. So, for me, he scored that back end touchdown. It made it look a little worse. But at the end of the day, Drew Aller had a day. Somebody they do not have this year, Keandre Lambert-Smith, the transfer to Auburn. He was the number 1 receiver last year. They're going to be looking for Trey Wallace to step up for them and be that number 1 receiver, or Julian Fleming, the 5-star Ohio State transfer that didn't see the field there in a couple of years. So I think that's going to be something to watch. Theo Johnson moves on to the NFL for them. Tyler Warren, who's a really good tight end, is going to be trying to replace him. He'll probably be the number 1 option in game 1, in my opinion. And then they lose 3 offensive linemen, Penn State does. I'm building the case for West Virginia through my question areas for Penn State. Fashanu, Wallace, Hunter Norzad, and the offensive line all gone to the NFL for Penn State. They've got to replace a ton of production, including possibly the best tackle in football last year in Fashanu, first-round pick. Juricic is out. Diaz is out. Kodolnicki's in. Allen's in. You're replacing 2 coordinators. That's tough, in my opinion, especially in game 1. Is Kodolnicki scary? Yes. We all know what he can do. Yeah. What's he going to do with an immobile quarterback in Drew Aller, though? I'm curious to see. They do have a backup that has a ton of speed and athleticism. We'll see what happens with that. But I just think in game 1, I bring that up because I think, getting them in game 1 is important here with this prediction. West Virginia returns 93% of its production and a ton of continuity. And that includes the entire front 7 returns. We're hearing the back end of that defense is gelling, and the special teams have improved. West Virginia, I do know for a fact, is going to be able to run the ball against Penn State. They did it last year. They ran for over 150 yards against them. And they're going to be much improved this year with a 2 running back system. And Jaheim White didn't even play in last year's game. So that's scary in of its own self. So for me, the reason West Virginia wins is because of these questions. Yurchik's out, Diaz out, Kotelnicki in, Allen in, Bastion Wallace, Hunter Norzed out. How are you going to replace all that offensive line production? Trey Wallace is going to have to replace Keandre Lambert-Smith. Julian Fleming comes in, never played at Ohio State. He's going to have to be a guy all of a sudden. And then Tyler Warren is going to be really their only weapon in game 1, in my opinion. And I'm not as deep into Penn State as maybe some of their guys are, like Locked On Penn State. We've debated. But I feel like I make a pretty strong argument.
I would rather have Garrett Green than Drew Aller. I'm not scared of a Drew Aller on the road, especially in a road environment like Morgantown, West Virginia. And I point here to Garrett Green. Jaheim White, obviously spectacular, and C.J. Donaldson is massive, very good, creates a great backfield. But I would argue Garrett Green is as prolific a runner as he is a passer. The guy on the ground is electric and almost gives you a third running back, a third option, certainly there, that made West Virginia the 4th best rushing offense in the country last year. The question I would then pose, 91st in the country in passing offense. Will that change this season? Maybe even better, does it need to change?
It does need to get better consistency-wise. Obviously, Garrett Green led the country in deep ball passes last year with 31, what they consider big-time throws, like through PFF. Yeah. He also led the country in the 2-minute drill. I had Max on from the Pro Football Focus. He looked that up live on my show. Garrett Green led the country under 2 minutes last year. He had several game-winning drives. Unfortunately, the Houston one doesn't count because of what happened.
Yeah.
But
it was a hell of a drive, too, guys.
It was a hell of a drive. You know, Garrett's a big game hunter. He loves to throw it deep. He throws an excellent deep ball. But what guys like Justin Robinson and Bray are going to do is give him over 6'2" receivers that can really control the middle of the field. And you've got a 6'7" tight end in his second year in the offense with Garrett as well. And then Garrett was mentioned as one of the 5 best at the Manning Passing Academy. He's really worked on his footwork. It was his first year ever as a starter as a quarterback last year, and he rushed for almost 1,000 yards and 13 touchdowns on the ground. I'm exaggerating a little bit. It was more like 800, but in my head, it's almost 1,000.
Right.
And they were the number 1 Power 4 rushing team. So you mentioned 4th. You're right, but among Power 4 teams, number 1. So I wanted to point that out as well because it sounded like I was lying. Just wanted to make sure. But so for me, I think those are all going to be huge factors. Garrett has to get better at throwing in the middle of the field. He's got to do that. His completion percentage is bad at 53%. We feel like if he can raise that 7%, which is doable, and get to 60, we feel good about it. So he's got to improve, no doubt about it.
One of my favorite players that we have not mentioned a whole lot yet, and maybe my favorite sneaky player coming into the Big 12 this season, Hudson Clement. Thoughts on one Hudson Clement?
Yeah, Huddy Tuddy, man, as we call him. He is a completely different body this year. He was also a freshman last year. And
walked
really
on, right? Like, hello.
Yeah, he earned his scholarship after the Duquesne game. And he really, really deserved it. Man, what a story. And we're rooting for him. Obviously, any West Virginia kid like him and P. Fox, we all want them guys to do well. And Hudson's an outside guy. P. Fox is an inside slot guy, and he has the best hands on the team. He's made spectacular catch over spectacular catch. If Preston Fox was 6'3", he'd be an NFL draft pick. And I'm not saying he still can't be, but he is more like your Wes Welker. And so we're really looking forward to. He's going to be a starter. He's going to be one of the starters coming right out the gate. Preston Fox, along with Huddy Tuddy. So we're really excited. And then we're probably thinking T. Ray or Bray are going to be one of the other guys. But Cole Taylor is really, I feel like, going to have a big year this year. And one other guy I feel like deserves some credit or some mention really quick. It doesn't get talked about at all. People talked about our entire offensive line as a whole. But Wyatt Milo is a first-round draft pick and hasn't allowed a sack in 2 years. And he's really going to – that Abdul Carter – Wyatt Milan matchup in week 1 at Penn State, maybe 2 of the 10 best players in all of college football going against each other that day.
I just can't, man. A freshman, walk-on, earns a scholarship midseason and puts up almost 500 yards receiving. And only on 22, like I say only, but 22 receptions that translates to 500 yards is pretty
almost
absurd.
20 yards a catch. Yeah, he really is a deep guy.
That's what he gives you. Look, first and foremost, I say first and foremost as if we're not already done with the show. Congratulations on being the host of Locked On West Virginia. Before we go, where can folks find more of your stuff on social media as you transition into that show? Yeah,
it's right down there at Paul Mountaineer. And thank you for letting me do that. You can find most of my West Virginia content goes on there. If I'm live, it'll also be live on X usually. And then at hoops_heels is another show that I do that's separate from the Locked On, but it's on X as well. And that's basketball content, but that'll probably be changing some.
Gotcha. That's Mountaineer Paul. Thanks for joining the show today.
Thanks, man.
And for those listening, thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. Coming up tomorrow, even more about the Big 12 Conference as we transform into the 2024 college football season. This has been and always will be Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.